Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about something called a limit. And we have a definition right up here. And I'm going to explain that definition so you understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say, let's pretend that this is the graph of f of x. Okay, and obviously f of x has several pieces to it. So we're going to start by looking at something that talks about the limit of f of x. Let's see, as x approaches 1, but then I'm going to put a minus sign here. Okay, so what I mean by that is this. This is saying as x approaches 1 from the negative direction. This isn't minus 1, this is a negative 1 rather. Okay, it's 1 from the negative direction. When the negative or positive sign comes after the number, that means from the negative direction, as opposed to, hold on and I'll show you, if we had the limit of the function as x approaches 1 from the positive direction. Okay, so now I know you still don't know what that means, but I'm going to show you. All right, so if we are looking at this graph and we want to approach 1 from the negative direction, think about a number line. From the negative direction would be coming from the left, wouldn't it? So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to find x equals 1, which is right here, and I want to find the piece of the graph that's coming from the left-hand side, because this is 1 from the negative direction. And these are all the negative numbers, right? So the piece of the graph that's directly to the left of this would be this piece right here. So what we do is, it's kind of like we're taking a walk. We're going to start at the far end here. As we get closer and closer and closer to 1, do you notice we're coming from the negative direction? We're coming from the left, moving toward the right. As we get closer to 1, you ask yourself, what is your y value? And do you see that your y value here is at negative 1? Okay, so then your answer here is negative 1. Now, maybe that doesn't totally make sense. Hold on. Take notes in your packet too, please. Okay, so let me explain the other half, and then hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense, and we'll do more. So now look at the function as x approaches 1 from the positive direction. Think of a number line. Positive direction would be coming from the right side here, right? So again, I'm going to look for where x is equal to 1, which is right here. And I want to know, as x approaches 1 from the positive direction, let's find that part of the graph that's to the right of here, which would be this part. Okay? Now we're coming from the right-hand side, so we go to the far right-hand side of this graph, and we kind of creep up. Okay, as I get closer to an x value of 1, where is my y value getting closer to? Do you see my y value is getting higher and higher? Now, I understand, do you see I have an open circle there? It doesn't reach that y value of 2, but do you see that it gets closer to that y value of 2? That's the definition of a limit. It doesn't have to have a closed-in circle here or a shaded-in circle. It just has to get closer to it. So as I move up this line, I'm getting closer and closer to a y value of 2. So that means this answer would be a 2. Okay? So again, coming from the left-hand side of 1, so here's 1, this is the left-hand side. From the left, work your way to the right. Look, your y value stays constant. Your answer is always going to be a y value, by the way. So my y value here is negative 1, whereas my y value here is getting closer and closer and closer to a 2. Okay? Now, let's go back to this definition. The limit exists if the limit coming from the left-hand side is equal to the limit coming from the right-hand side. Well, look here. This is the limit coming from the left-hand side, and this is the limit coming from the right-hand side. Do you see that these guys do not equal each other? So in that case, since these guys are not equal, then we would say the limit of the function as x approaches 1 Now notice I don't have a little minus after it or a plus after it anymore, okay? I can't fit it, so I'm going to write equals, and I just have to stick it down here. Does not exist, okay? And the reason why it doesn't exist is because this y value goes to -1, and this y value goes to 2. They don't go to the same y value, and that is why the limit would not exist. All right, so let's look at the same picture again, and let's take another point. So now I'm going to look at -3 from both the negative direction and from the positive direction. So let me go up here. There's -1, -2. Here's -3. So the part of the graph that's coming from the left-hand side would be this portion right here. So let's follow it from the left-hand side. And if you notice, I'm going further up and up. Again, I don't have to have a closed-in circle here. But I see that the y value gets higher and higher, and it goes toward a y value of +3. Okay? So my limit as x approaches -3 from the negative direction would be a +3. Again, because this is going higher and higher, and it's approaching a y value of 3. It doesn't have to reach it. It doesn't need to be a closed-in circle. All right, now let's look at this direction. This is saying, same picture, go toward -3, but from the positive direction, so from the right-hand side. So here's -3. The right-hand side would be this piece of the graph right here. And again, do you notice that this piece of the graph goes higher and higher and higher, and it approaches a y value of 3. So do you see that these guys from the right and from the left come toward the same point? They don't reach it, but they come toward it, okay? Which is different than the last one that I did. So now you can see, since these guys both come toward the same y value, again, they don't need to reach it, they just have to come toward it, then we can say the limit of the function as x approaches -3 would be, it would exist, and it would be a 3. And the reason why it would be a 3 is because this answer is a 3 and this answer is a 3. If these two match up, then your answer is 3. Okay? So when I'm looking at just this entire limit, I have to look at the limit coming toward from the left and coming from the right to determine this answer. Okay? All right, turn the page in your packet, make sure you're taking notes, and look at page 2. So we're going to do the same thing again. Now if you look at this one, this is the limit as x approaches -1 from the negative direction, then from the positive direction, and then it's basically saying if your answers here are the same, what would be the limit here? And if they're not the same, then what would be the limit here? All right, so let's go from the left-hand side. So here's -1. The graph from the left-hand side would be this kind of parabola-ish looking thing, right? Okay, so let's see what happens. As we work our way, look at what happens as we get closer to -1. Do you see we approach, we don't hit it, but we approach a y value of 2. Okay, so then my answer here would be 2. All right, now let's come from the right-hand side of -1. So here's -1. From the right-hand side would be this piece of the graph. Now let's look at what happens as we get closer to -1. We're getting higher and higher, and again, we're approaching a y value of 2. We get higher and higher till we come close to, but don't reach, that y value of 2. So this answer is 2. Now look, these guys are the same, so then my answer here would be 2. Okay, now let's look at part D, because this doesn't have a little plus or a minus. So now this is saying as x approaches -4. So what you have to do is find -4 and look at the limit coming from the left, and you have to look at the limit coming from the right and see if they approach the same y value. So like here, when we did part A, B, and C, look, they both met that -2. It was an open circle, but that doesn't matter. They both meet. Do you see coming from the left here, I go to a y value of 3. But coming from the right here, I go to a y value of 4. These guys don't meet. There's a gap there. We call that a jump. But if there's a gap, then your answer is going to be D, N, E. Does not exist. Okay? And we're going to spend more time on this. So this is just kind of an introduction right now, so don't panic. All right, let's look at the last one. This one says as x approaches 4. Again, there's no little plus or minus sign after that. So what that means is you have to look coming from the left and coming from the right. So here's 4, coming from the left, coming from the right. We got a space here. So look, coming from the left, its y value is -3, right? It goes toward -3. But coming from the right here, its y value goes toward -2. That's not the same number. So since there's a gap there, we happen to have another D, N,